Welcome to the Road to Accountable AI. I'm Kevin Werback, Professor of Legal Studies and Business Ethics at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. For decades, I've studied emerging technologies from broadband to blockchain. Today, artificial intelligence promises to transform our world. But AI won't reach its potential without accountability, mechanisms to ensure it's deployed in responsible, safe, and trustworthy ways. On this podcast, I speak with the experts leading the charge for accountable AI. Nuala O'Connor is Senior Vice President and Chief Counsel of Digital Citizenship at Walmart. She's held positions related to privacy and technology governance at Amazon, General Electric, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and the Center for Democracy and Technology. We talk about the relationship between responsible AI and data protection, how Walmart structures its AI governance activities, how its responsible AI pledge ties into corporate values towards customers and employees, and what it means to promote trust in AI. Here is my conversation with Nuala O'Connor. Nuala, welcome. It's so great to talk to you.
It's so great to be here, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
You've been involved for a long time at a number of different organizations, public sector, private sector, nonprofit, on issues around internet policy, privacy, and so forth. How is it different, or is it different in your perspective, what's happening now with AI?
You know, Kevin, I think there are a lot of conversations right now about whether this is truly different and kind of the really monumental change in how we live our lives. I'm a little bit of a skeptic about that, in that I guess perhaps because you and I have been working in this area for so long, we've seen the trains of large language models and automated decision making and just software, that runs really fast in the background. Why I think this feels really different to people is that, first of all, this has come into the wild. I mean, it's come into the public use very quickly, and that it seems to be alive. People seem to feel like this is making decisions about them, or it's talking back to them. And although we know cognitively it's not alive, having a converse with you, having an inanimate object suddenly talk your language feels different than previous iterations of technology. Why I think it's important that we scrutinize it is, and I've said this before, it's not only the data that we're putting into it, it's the decisions it's making about us in the world.
What about the development of AI governance and policy? How have you seen the regulatory developments in this area around AI relative to what we saw a decade ago or 2 decades ago with the internet and privacy?
I think because it's moved so quickly from not known to known in the public, the policymaking world is trying to catch up as usual to technology and doing it quickly. What I've also seen is that good companies, I think, are ready to apply governance principles to new technologies, because this is not the first one, right? We have internet, we have social media, we have lots of policies around other uses of technologies by our own, what we call employees, our associates. And so we in particular at my company were ready. We had already thought about and started to build and started to benchmark with other companies. What does good governance look like for these tools? And of course, to say AI, it's almost like saying sidewalks, right? It encompasses so much, right? But to be general, kind of looking at emerging technologies, biometrics, AI, and a whole bunch of other de novo uses of technology in the real world, proximate to human beings. We did set about looking at what the tech companies were offering, looking at what other companies were recommending, looking at what trade associations and think tanks were saying about governance and the possibilities of governance. I also sometimes like to call it trying to govern the ungovernable, right? Because it's so opaque in so many ways. But it's also, we shouldn't engage in that kind of tech exceptionalism, that we are so special and so new and so different that we shouldn't play by some reasonable rules, or that it's just too hard to figure out. If it's too hard to figure out, we shouldn't be using it, right? So what we did was look at ordinary processes that companies put into place, what the company's principles are, and then how we apply those as people, and it's usually our engineering, our data scientists, our tech folks who want to deploy new tools that will affect human beings. We pull those out of the work streams and say, if this tool is going to be making consequential decisions about a human being, their rights, their knowledge, their abilities to move forward, in most particular their employment and advancement, that tool is going to require additional close scrutiny by technologists and by lawyers and policy people before it goes live, and then at waypoints, 6 months, a year, and then perhaps annually after that, because as you know, these tools drift, they change, that it is a constant governance model, and we're still building towards automation in our governance and monitoring of tools of all kinds. But again, I don't think just because it's new and funky and cool, it should escape some kind of scrutiny. In fact, maybe more so because of that.
So you issued a Walmart Responsible AI pledge in October of 2023. And first of all, I'm curious, it's interesting that you call it a pledge. It's not just a set of principles. Tell me a little bit about the process of developing that.
Like all of our kind of internal policies, statements, pledges, it's really a multifunctional endeavor. I don't think the lawyers should sit in a room and write things. I don't think the technologists should sit in a room and write things. The comms people shouldn't be working by themselves. It was really a kind of collaborative approach that a number of our teams came to my team and said, we'd like to say something publicly about the guardrails and the guidelines and really the values that we live by as a company. And I said, really, who's going to listen to that? Again, somewhat the skeptic, but in all seriousness, the pledge is really to our customers and associates, people who we are engaging with, to both be transparent and accountable in our uses. And that's sort of really reflects one of the things I say to my team all the time. When we are introducing new technologies into the environment of human beings, whether it's online or in the stores, in the real world, in offices, in warehouses, anywhere our associates work, we have a duty to explain. Because in many cases, it may be the first time someone's come into contact with this. And so I always say to our team, inform, educate, entertain. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Inform, obviously notice that that something is happening in the environment that is different. It's particularly in the stores, which were 20 years ago, you could walk in, you could walk out, you could pay cash, you would be unobserved to any system in the world. That's changing, obviously, with your cell phones, with electric cash registers, with cameras in the stores for security and safety. I think we have a duty to inform. We are meeting people where they are in their comfort level with technology, in their educational level, in their language abilities, and we have to speak to all of those people. So that's inform. Educate. Tell them a little more. Tell them a little more about what the technology does, how it works. When I grew up in New York, there was a company called Sims. I actually had a summer job there one summer, and their phrase was, "An educated consumer is our best customer." I believe the same thing about technology and the technology and responsible technology use of our company. If they know the responsible choices we're making about these technologies, it will engender trust and mutual respect, and hopefully really benefit the ongoing customer-store relationship. And the last part is entertain. And honestly, this is fun. You and I were talking a little while ago. In all of the years we've been working, I get to learn something new almost every day. And, certainly every year there's a new, or every few years there's some monumental change in the technology. That's a joy. It's really a joy to be a part of that and to learn and to, be surrounded by people who are just so smart and dedicated and both want to do the right thing and also want to use the latest technology to do whatever it is their job requires. And it should be fun. We had a long time ago, we had these sweepers in some of the stores. And if you go into a Sam's Club, you might still see them. And I forget the brand name, but they were about the height of a, I don't know, 10 or 12-year-old boy. I'm thinking about my son. He's probably, a few years ago, but almost eye level. And they had cameras. And the purpose of the camera was actually to scan the shelves to say what's out of stock so that people in the back storeroom would go, okay, on aisle 7, we need to get more, cereal. But a reasonable person would think, is that camera looking at me? What's that camera? What's it recording? What's it going to do with that information? So I said to the guys, first of all, I thought we should have put vests on them and made them, anthropomorphize them, and also have disclosures right there on the machine that says, I'm not looking at you. In fact, we had blurred out any facial features of any human being to just be looking at boxes and QR codes and the like. but it can be fun. I have no problem with anthropomorphizing the technology if it helps people understand and feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's interesting that one of the values that is in that pledge is customer centricity, which is not typically what people see in terms of AI. You've got things like fairness and so forth. But why is customer centricity for Walmart a value in terms of responsible AI?
I think so many times companies roll out technologies that they say are for the customer, but are really for the company or really have some other purpose. And in this case, when we say customer centricity, it really goes to what I was saying before. Does the customer understand? Do they feel comfortable with it? Is it a use case that enhances their experience? That's, I think, some of the values I think about when I think about customer centricity. But ultimately, it's about, does this deployment serve the humans with which it is proximate? Um, and if it doesn't, why are we doing it? And if those customers or associates don't understand it, then we have failed in our kind of, again, duty of care, our duty to inform, educate, and explain. So I think it really goes to, we recognize that people will be impacted, even just having it in their environment, having it nearby, and that there may be different levels of comfort with it, and that we have a responsibility to all of our customers, regardless of their comfort level.
What else do you think is distinctive about the way you approach these AI issues, given that Walmart is a retailer that touches literally hundreds of millions of customers directly, as opposed to enterprise service providers, for example?
Well, again, it's because it's a frontline human machine interface, right? We get to live in the real world and physical world as well as the internet, and see how people feel comfortable with these tools. It's funny that we were focused on customers, because I would say our most effective rollouts initially were in tools that support our associates in what they're doing. I give the example, and I don't think it's a real one, maybe a real one now. When I was doing a Sam's Club tour, and they let me decorate cupcakes, which I think is hilarious. Now, anyone who's had a young child knows, when you're ordering a birthday cake, you want to make sure you get the red one or the blue one, or the right number of roses, or the right number of decorations. And so there are guidebooks that tell associates, this is how many roses you put on an 8 by 11 sheet cake, and this is what it should look like. For a new associate, or even for someone experienced who hasn't done this particular task before, that means they run to the back room, they have to flip through the thing, they have to page through and say, what is, and then read, and then decorate, and then read. Just one example of all the many thousands of things associates do in a day. With AI, there is the potential, and I believe it's deployed already in some places in the country, to simply say, and we have a tool called Ask Sam. We have another tool. We have tools named a number of things that are kind of in the Walmart legend and language, and say, Sam, how do I decorate an 8.5 by 11 sheet cake for a young, for a boy, for a girl, for in a fire truck, whatever. And that will save time, saves effort. They can say, repeat that. It will really be an efficiency builder for an associate. And again, that's a very, I think, fun and upbeat example. But there are lots of paper-based or knowledge worker examples as well that improve efficiency. One of the things we have put online are a number of our employee manuals, our benefits manuals, basic information. When you've got millions of associates, many of them are going to be asking the same question, right? So saves time, make sure the information is accurate, every associate's getting the same information. That's a good example of where regular old AI is a good enough tool. You do not need generative AI, because you actually don't want it learning. You don't want it learning and changing the content. You want that content to be static and accurate and correct for everybody. That's, I think, one of the other points I would make is, people have gotten really excited about generative AI, and it's a fascinating tool, and there's lots of good and bad about it. But it's not necessarily the right tool for every job that you might think of. And so fit for purpose, to me, is a really big question. And accuracy and truth of the information. To me, those are some of the biggest worries I have about generative AI.
How do you structure the work on responsible AI in your organization, or your organization relative to the rest of the company?
Thanks for asking. So digital citizenship is, as we define it, the responsible use of technology and data period, full stop. That's the mission. We have now I've got the privilege of leading a team of several hundred people. And that includes lawyers, technologists, data scientists, policy people. It's basically half kind of legal and half compliance and operational. So we went about setting up a team. I really think the woman who got to lead that team when we created it had one of the best jobs in the company, because her first year was doing all the research and the benchmarking and finding all the best practices and then standing up the team for us. And again, it is the people who created the original policy went right up to the leadership of the company to say, these are the rules for rolling out an AI tool that has an impact on a human being, and then created a kind of a gate in our rollout processes to try to explain it without too much jargon, that says, is this an AI tool? Does it impact humans? If so, you've got to be reviewed and answer some questions and engage with the digital values team. That's the name of the team. And again, that team includes and is led right now by a data scientist, and they will kind of probe and scrutinize, the algorithm itself, the purpose for the tool, who's rolling out, who is the responsible kind of business owner of it, and then schedule, not just do the initial scrutiny, but schedule kind of follow-up, monitoring, and oversight. So kind of all the tools of a traditional compliance program, but applied to this new technology. And so far, so good. And we've worked with quite a few teams. I don't have an exact number of how many tools they've scrutinized, but the team is busy and it's growing. So I think the metric is, as we do more in this area, they have more work to do. But the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity is really one of education, of getting out and making sure that all of our technologists understand what's expected of them and how we expect them to think about the tools that they're deploying from the beginning. So, if we educate everybody, actually, it will cut down on the work for this team, but all to the good, because there's plenty of other work to do. And I really want each of our associates to think of themselves as a responsible user of the technology and data.
This is always a challenge with compliance, though. How do you convince them that this is valuable and it's not going to slow down what they're trying to do?
Such a good question. And it's funny because I don't say I bristle at those questions. It's always been a perennial, like, is privacy getting in the way of productivity or of profits or whatever? We really do believe in customer trust and associate trust and putting people first. So, I really posit it as an issue of trust and responsibility, and that engenders, a better relationship with the company, and that we are in a competitive environment where this is a benefit. It's considered a good thing, I think, by our customers. We see more and more educated customers about technology and asking the questions about how it's being used. So I really don't think of it as antithetical, but rather as kind of, enhancing our relationship with our customers. And we do try to be lean. Obviously, we try to be really efficient and not put every AI tool that's just deciding. The example I always use, and it is a real one, is, are the bananas on the conveyor belt ripe? We've got AI that looks at fruit and vegetables and meat and things and says, based on what it has learned over the last how many years, and what a good thing, right? We want, good quality food to be eaten and safe and that sort of thing. That we do not consider, it's impactful to humans, obviously indirectly, but we're not making judgments about humans. They do not need to go through the digital value scrutiny. But I think, frankly, in my experience, most people want to do the right thing. They're not always sure how their job, affects that right thing and the service to the customer and associate. So it's a big company. And so education and outreach across multiple languages, multiple parts of the world, multiple job descriptions, that to me is an exciting educational challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've got a screen that is similar to what many of the governments are coming up with in terms of there's high risk AI or whatever it's described at. This is what we really need to worry about. Then there's all kinds of other uses of AI that maybe don't need the same scrutiny.
Right. I hope people do look at it as a kind of a spectrum that not everything deserves or merits or needs the same level of scrutiny, but some of it very much does. And in the corporate world, it's the impactful decision making that we would have would obviously be in hiring, advancement, people's rights and responsibilities as an employee. In the customer world, it's actually been even more fun because it's things like our AI chat bots and putting together different fashion pieces on the website and saying you bought a red sweater, maybe this blue skirt goes with it. Like this is fun. Obviously we want to be careful. We don't want to get it right, but it is not necessarily a consequential decision, depending on where you're going that day. Whether the skirt matches the sweater, but again, of a different ilk than financial or career or other things.
How does a team stay up to date with the fast changing nature of technology in this area?
That is such a great question. And it is, I think, a constant a part of everyone's job to be reading, to be engaged. We are members of quite a few, not only professional trade associations in retail, in law, and that sort of thing. I do find the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, to be increasingly aware, and they just today put out a big report on AI governance. And we're members of something called the Data and Trust Alliance, which was out front very early on. We were one of the founding members in looking at cross-industry guidance. So it's not just one area of industry, not just one size of institution, but how do we make governance real for all companies? And in fact, we, as well as many small and medium enterprises, sometimes are procuring things from third parties, from vendors, and just like every other new technology, we see a flourishing of vendors coming in and saying, this is the key thing. This is the perfect tool for everything the solution for everything you've ever needed. And many people don't know how to scrutinize that, right? And we've even had salespeople in our office saying, oh, we can't really disclose the algorithm and we can't really explain how it works. And we're like, well, come back when you can, because that's not going to be good enough for our customers or associates. So rules around how to engage with vendors and how to scrutinize those tools, as well as the ones you're building internally, I think are really important. And that's a role that DTA has played.
Do you have benchmarks or goals or way to assess whether you're being successful in these efforts?
That is, I think benchmarking, especially when it's in the policy world, is hard. But certainly some of our benchmarking is how many tools have gone through, how many secondary reviews we've done. Customer complaints are also, a metric if things are making the wrong decision or the right decision. And so that's what we're looking at right now. But if you got any ideas, I'm all ears.
Well, no, it's an interesting challenge because on the one hand, there's value in coordination and standardization, and on the other hand, what makes sense for an organization at the scale of Walmart is not going to be at the right thing for a startup or for a company that's in a completely different industry. Right. And so that's why I'm curious about how different organizations think about and see progress in those areas.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think there's some core values that probably cut across in terms of transparency and kind of, again, fit for purpose, or scrutinizing high risk tools more than others. But I recognize also the place of privilege that I sit in, and being able to stand up an entire team to think about and then go do and create a whole new compliance program around this. And so well aware, and that's why DTA said about creating kind of products and workbooks and things for smaller and medium enterprises that they're kind of off the shelf guidance as well.
Are there any major gaps that you see, either in terms of what resources or tools are available to you, or in any other area?
I think we can always do more. Again, back to the comment about governing the ungovernable, we can all do more to really think about how to automate and really probe, the tools in a consistent fashion. And like we were saying before, there's obviously a lot of concern around bias and about, accuracy. But how do you prove that it is doing the thing that it's supposed to do, and that it's not doing the thing it's not supposed to do? There's not a lot of standardization in that yet. And so standard setting bodies, where are you? I'm sure someone's working on a framework for us to all follow at some point. But and I know you and I were going to talk about kind of legislation and government interaction. I get very concerned when I think government actors are saying, "Oh, we have to regulate this one thing," right? Again, as we were saying, AI is, it's like the air or the sidewalks. It's just a tool and a platform for doing something else. And I'm usually the one saying, is there a law that prevents this already? Is there something on the books that simply hasn't been enforced in this area or hasn't been applied to tools like this yet? If it's really, really that new, certainly it may need some level of regulation or legislation. But I'm usually the skeptic saying, we may have rules about this already, about being unfair to people, based on race or gender, and let's look at what's on the books already.
Yeah, I mean that's a big challenge that we're seeing a lot. Where I talk to lots of people who say, well, companies can't be trusted, and their incentives are not aligned, and we know this technology is so new. So, how do you convince people that the resources and the mechanisms are there to address the problems that arise?
Um, I certainly hear the same things, and I certainly know people, that big companies are just whatever. Big companies are made out of people, right? And so, um, it's not been my experience, not here and not in other big and small places that I've worked, that people want to do the wrong thing. In fact, I think our incentives are entirely aligned, because if we lose the trust of our customers, if we lose the trust of regulators in the countries in which we do business, then the consequences are much greater than just failing in one program or product. It's a an enterprise wide impact. So I again, I'm skeptical. I understand it's good to have a healthy skepticism of large institutions in general, and I respect that. And that's why part of back to why we came out with the AI pledge is like, that is something that we feel is worth talking about, that we are committed to walking our values forward in the digital world, in this tool, in this setting, and in others. And if people feel like we're not doing it, they should let me know. They should let our CEO know, and they do occasionally, including some of our own associates, which I actually love. I love it when people raise a hand and say, this doesn't feel quite right to me. And I got a letter once from a pharmacist in Michigan, and he said, I don't like that policy, and it actually started a whole review from the ground up of how we were dealing with a particular issue. So I think we try to be very responsive. Something I've tried to talk about within the company is, and all of the good governance we put in on this tool, these tools and others, mistakes may still happen. That's the really big challenge I find, especially for a company that prides itself on its reputation and doing things right. Um, it's not an environment where we like to fail fast and move on. We really do kind of bet our reputation on a lot of things. And what I've tried to encourage my team and others in leadership is to realize that if a mistake happens, we're going to have to work hard and fast to fix it. But I think people will give us grace if we are transparent about it. If we say, this is what happened, here's what we're doing to fix this incident, and here's what we're putting in place to have it not happen again. So especially in kind of generative AI, when it moves and talks and it moves fast, we need to be ready to both be humble and be nimble in that area.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges with generative AI is what you said, touches so many people that now it's not just the data scientists who are building things. What does trust really mean to you in that context? I think it's a really important and valuable point that this is all about creating and promoting trust. But what does that actually boil down to?
On a website, it means we've correctly described a product. Say you've got a child who's allergic to peanut butter, you better be sure that the product you've bought does not have peanut butter in it. That's really important to us, and that was important to us before there was generative AI. But now, if you have generative AI creating product descriptions, you've got to make sure they're right. And as we know, generative AI is not always right. So, in some tools we're just about to put out in the world, we used outside consultants to red team, to probe it, to try to crash it, and things still do go wrong. But I think putting in the effort before it goes live to really try to stress test it, and then to stay again really vigilant about how the AI might change, is essential. I feel again a deep sense of responsibility, not just because it's the catchphrase of our team, but I think all kind of purveyors of technology should be thinking about the impact it's having on the world and on the people it comes into contact with.
And going forward, are there either developments that you're looking to or anything that you see coming in the next few years that are going to be particularly important in this area?
Mm. Well, I can tell you the things I'm the most worried about. Unfortunately, it's
Mm.
not the way to start the answer to that question, but
Fair enough.
the things that I worry about are the appearance of accuracy and truth when it is not there.
Mm.
It's too cute to say fake news, but just simply the authoritative answers that often are provided by these tools that are simply incorrect. Um, do all of our citizens in this country or elsewhere have the ability to be good consumers of this kind of media savvy or media, digital kind of citizenship in the true sense of can we consume and analyze information uh, for its content and for its provenance, and do we have the tools to help us do that? I saw a great study years ago about kind of government issued propaganda, and Americans were more likely to click on something that was kind of seemed to be true, but it was a little bit off than many parts of Eastern Europe.
Hmm.
And I thought, wow, that kind of shocks me. We have free press and we have all this stuff. And it was because they had lived with propaganda, perhaps in more recent times than we had. And I thought, well, how do we get to, a place where we have really empowered internet users of all, again, ages, shapes, sizes, everything, to scrutinize the information, or perhaps have penalties for people who put out things knowingly that are incorrect. That's to me one of the hardest questions for the internet community, for the world, and one of the consequences of generative AI that worries me the most. The other one is our kids using it to write term papers, but that to me, the exciting thing to me is always not just the general utility for human beings, but I have a son who's on the spectrum. We have lots of associates who are disabled or in some way. We have many, customers. We've just started. You may have seen quiet hours in the stores where every morning for 2 hours, everything in the sound wise and the lights are lowered. And it's been a joy to watch that evolve and people really get excited about it. I always call it the kind of the ancillary effects as well. People of all kinds who may not fit in a traditional kind of disability community have said some people just like it quiet. My husband says, I would much rather shop when it's quiet and people and whatever. So the thing I'm the most excited about, not just about AI and generative AI, but technology, is the ability to assist humans who are physically, cognitively, otherwise diverse or challenged in some way. And Gen AI, especially in voice enabled, is just a boon for many people, and I'm excited about that. What that means for our workforce, enabling more people to join our workforce. Generally join the workforce, and enabling customers to find the information they want and the goods and services they want. I think that's one of the best and highest uses of technology.
No question. No, it's all tremendously exciting, and it's sort of the paradox, isn't it, of this technology that what makes it exciting is also what in some ways makes it scary. I mean, you talked about sort of two sides of citizenship in both the corporate and the public governmental context, where this technology can be so great at personalizing, but that can also be abused.
Right. So true. So true. And transparency is necessary but not sufficient answer.
Absolutely. Nuala, really great to talk to you. Thanks so much for sharing your experiences and what you're doing at Walmart.
Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
This has been The Road to Accountable AI. If you like what you're hearing, please give us a good review and check out my Substack for more insights on AI accountability. Thank you for listening.